Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reda with Future Pastimes. I'm one of the designers for the expansions to the 2019 edition of the classic Dune board game, published by Gale Force 9. So I worked on the two expansions that are out so far. The latest one is our Chom and Richesse expansion. There's Chom, there's Richesse. I also worked on our first expansion, which is the Ixians and Tleilaxu expansion, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. In fact, we're just going to showcase the Tleilaxu. The purple faction. Purple is my favorite color, and they are my favorite faction. So I'm quite pleased to talk about the Tleilaxu in this video. Now, in the Dune universe, the Tleilaxu, they are these genetic scientists and engineers, but they have a reputation for being very secretive and very suspicious and very sinister and loathed. And part of the loathing is that they're manipulating dead bodies and reviving them and doing a lot of just kind of sketchy genetic work that maybe crosses some ethical lines. And but the other reason that they are loathed and feared is because of the way that they're able to infiltrate the other factions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into their advantages. So let's start off by going over their faction sheet and talking about what the Tleilaxu do. They're going to start with all 20 of their forces in reserves, and they only start with 5 spice. So at the beginning of the game, they're relatively weak, but as the game progresses, in fact, the longer it progresses, the more of an economic faction the Tleilaxu become. And that is largely because they are tied to the Tleilaxu tanks, which is where your dead forces and leaders go, and the whole revival mechanism of Dune. So let's actually start with that. That's actually on the back of their sheet, but it's still a basic and advanced advantage, and that has to do with revival. So first of all, the Tleilaxu, they have no revival limits. So now normally you can revive up to 3 of your forces each turn, and that includes however many you're getting with your free revival. So if you have a free revival of 2, you could also revive 1 more force normally. With the Tleilaxu, they can revive all of their forces. If all 20 of their forces are in the tanks, they could revive all 20 of them in 1 turn. The other thing is that normally when your leaders are killed, you can't revive dead leaders until all 5 of your leaders are in the tanks, pretty much. So the Tleilaxu, they could revive their leaders right away. If one of them gets killed in the first turn, they could revive it in the second turn. The other thing is you can only revive normally 1 leader per turn. But the Tleilaxu, if all 5 of their leaders were in the tanks on the first turn, they could revive all 5 of them in the second turn if they could afford it. But all of their revival is at half price. So if they want to get forces, it's 1 spice per force. And if they want to get leaders out, it's half the cost of half of the strength rounded up. So if it's a 5 strength leader, that would be 3 spice to revive that leader. The 6 strength, also 3 spice. So that is for their revival. Now, for everybody else, the Tleilaxu get paid for the revivals. So first of all, when any faction takes free revival, the Tleilaxu collect 1 spice from the spice bank, and that's also for their own. So if they take free revival, they're going to get 1 spice. Anyone else takes free revival, they get 1 spice for each one. And if anyone pays to revive additional forces, they're paying the Tleilaxu directly. The Tleilaxu can also increase the force revival limit from 3 to 5 for all of the other factions. So they can say, look, if you can afford to revive a couple more of your forces, by all means, go ahead and do it. The other thing that Tleilaxu can do is they can negotiate the release from the tanks of your dead leaders well before having to wait until all 5 of them are dead. So if you have a leader that's killed on turn 1, the Tleilaxu can revive that leader for you on the second turn. But they can set the price, and you can try to negotiate with them. They can say, yeah, look, Stilgar is in the tanks. Well, you can get him back out, but it is going to cost you 10 spice. And normally it would only cost 7 to get Stilgar. But they can also say, look, I'll let you get Stilgar out for 5 spice. So they've got some flexibility there. And when you're in alliance with the Tleilaxu, then they can do all your revivals at half price. So you're only paying 1 spice per your force, up to 5. And of course, they can give you your leaders for free unless all 5 of your leaders are in the tanks, and then they could do it half price for a leader. And for other factions, if all of their leaders are in the tanks, then they are revived normally. So the Tleilaxu can't say, well, all 5 of your leaders are in the tanks, and if you want to get Dr. Yui out, it's going to cost you 11 spice. Dr. Yui only costs 1 spice to revive if all 5 of the Atreides leaders were in the tanks. So that's how that works. And so, yeah, they as the game goes on, the Tleilaxu start to make some decent spice through the revival, especially in a 6-player game. They can get 6 spice if everyone's taking free revival, and you get factions like the Emperor or the Guild maybe who've got a lot of spice. The Guild only has a free revival of 1, so they tend to have to spend more to get additional forces out. Likewise, the Emperor only gets 1 free revival, so they will pay. And the Emperor's alliance ability is they can actually pay for their ally to get an additional 3 forces out of the tanks if the Emperor pays for it. So the Tleilaxu want to see other factions, fight, so that they can get some of those revivals. And when I'm playing the Tleilaxu, I oftentimes like to go and pick fights with other factions, even if it is just with 1 force. I said 1 force into Carthage or Arakeen, fight it out. Usually Arakeen, though, because remember, if you lose a battle to the Harkonnen in advance, they're going to be capturing some of your leaders, which maybe for the Tleilaxu is not a big deal, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But yeah, they have to dial a certain number of forces almost always because they're not really sure what you're doing and what you're fishing for. So they're going to put forces in the tanks. That means you're going to get income. So sometimes it's worth it for you. Send a couple forces into some battles just to stir things up. And that leads us to, let me talk a little bit about their leaders. Now, the leaders in the Tleilaxu are not terribly impressive. So let's take a look. They've got Blinn. He's a 1. That's not great. And they've got Wick here. He's a 2. They've got Master Zaf, who is just a 3. Now you've got Hidar Fen Ajidica. He's a 4, and that's pretty good. Then they've got Zol, and you'll notice that Zol is an X. Well, Zol in the books is a face dancer, and a face dancer is somebody that can take on the appearance and sound and mannerisms of anybody else. They are really difficult to detect imposters, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of the Tleilaxu infiltrating the other factions. They are able to copy other people and take over, and nobody is the wiser. There's a great line, I think it's in God Emperor of Dune, where we are overrun by the Tleilaxu. They totally took over the Ixian embassy. Everybody who worked there was a face dancer. And so that was a real motivating factor for when we were designing this faction, is we really wanted to capitalize on that aspect of the Tleilaxu. And we did want this to be a faction that was loathed and feared. And so we flip over to the front of the faction sheet, and we're going to talk about face dancers. Now, at the start of the game, the Tleilaxu are not dealt any traitor cards. So normally all the other factions are drawing their 4 traitor cards, they're picking their 1 that they're going to keep, and then they're discarding the other 3. And the Harkonnen, of course, are keeping all 4. But after everybody has picked their traitor and put the ones that they didn't pick back into the traitor deck, it is shuffled, and then the Tleilaxu player draws 3 cards. And these cards are not actually traitors for the Tleilaxu, they are face dancers. So they don't get to reveal one in a battle against that player's faction when they see that leader and call traitor. But what they do get to do is they get to call face dancers. And that works whenever that particular leader who matches one of their traitor cards wins a battle against any faction. So the Tleilaxu don't actually have to be in the battle at all in order for them to use their face dancer advantage. So let's say that they have got Piter as a face dancer, and the Harkonnen faction is in a battle with the Fremen, and they use Piter and they win the battle. You as the Tleilaxu can then reveal that traitor card for Piter, and you can say, Piter was a face dancer. And so what happens is, if Piter survived that battle, He is dead and goes to the tanks, and no spice is collected for him. And all of the Harkonnen forces that survived the battle return to the reserves and are replaced by Tleilaxu forces from their reserves and or from somewhere on the board, up to that number of forces. So it turns out that their friend Piter was actually the Tleilaxu's friend Piter, and he was a face dancer, and all of his forces were face dancers during that battle. After all, they were not really Harkonnen forces at all. And so let's say that even if Piter was killed, so if he was killed, he's going to go to the tanks anyway, but you can still reveal that face dancer card, the traitor card, if the Harkonnen won the battle. Now, for the winner of the battle, it's still treated as a win. They get to keep any treachery cards they would normally keep for winning a battle. If you have tech tokens, they would get to take a tech token from their opponent for winning the battle. But they're not going to have any forces left in that territory. And, if they did kill the other leader, they would get spice for it, or for all the leaders that were killed in that battle. But if you end up revealing that traitor card as a face dancer and that kills the leader, no spice is collected for that leader. So the face dancers can be a really sneaky element. And so Zol is a face dancer as well, but he, as a leader, all the X means is that his strength is equal to the opponent's strength. So if you reveal Zol as your leader in a battle against Stilgar, then Zol is worth a 7. If you reveal him in a battle against Dr. Yui, then he's a 1. And reviving him will cost you 3 spice, no matter who he was when he was killed. He's 3 spice for the Tleilaxu to revive him. And if Zol is killed in a battle, the amount of spice collected is equal to the value of the leader that they're copied. And yes, if Zol is facing off against a cheap hero, then he's 0 and worth 0 spice if killed. So the face dancing is really central to the Tleilaxu as a whole, and it's probably their scariest faction advantage, because yes, technically the Tleilaxu could win the game having been in none of the battles at the end. So if they're lucky. But it doesn't really happen that often. In fact, you can have a whole game where not a single face dancer is revealed. So it's not unusual. But one of the things that you can do is, when you reveal a face dancer, it stays revealed in front of you. And the ones that you haven't played are unrevealed. And you can't reveal that face dancer again. If somehow they get out of the tanks and win a battle, nothing will happen. So they actually become a safe leader for a time. But the other thing that the Tleilaxu can do is at the end of each turn in the Mentat pause, they can take one of their unrevealed traitor cards and they can shuffle it back into the deck and then draw something new. So if they've got, for instance, if one of the cards is one of their own leaders, or if they've got somebody who is already dead and in the tanks, or maybe they're just a weak leader that you're like, all right, I don't think anyone's going to play, guild rep anytime soon. I'm going to shuffle that one back into the deck and draw something else, hopefully a leader more likely to win a battle and be used in the game. So that kind of increases the tension with the Tleilaxu. Because really, at the start of the game, unless you have chosen one of your own leaders, which you can do, when you're dealt your 4 traitor cards, you can say, all right, well, I've been dealt one of my own leaders. I might keep that so that I have a guaranteed safe leader. It won't be a traitor, won't be a face dancer for the rest of the game. But anybody else is going to go back in there. So a lot of times in the good old days of Dune, if you drew your 4 traitors and you say, all right, great, I'm going to pick this strong leader from that faction. He's my traitor, but I see that I've got, I'm Atreides and I've got Jessica and I've got Duncan, so I know that they're safe. Well, now you don't know that they're safe because they're going back into the deck, and then the Tleilaxu is going to be drawing their face dancers. So they might not be safe. And because they can cycle through the traitor deck throughout the game, you're more and more likely to get somebody that you thought was safe and is not safe anymore. So the last thing I'll explain is the advanced game advantage that the Tleilaxu have, and that is Golas. So in Dune, a Gola was somebody who was revived from the tanks from their DNA, from some cells that were collected, and you're able to bring back a character who was dead, and now they are alive again. They're not really necessarily entirely the same. You know, read the books and you'll see what I mean by that. In the game, the way that works is if the Tleilaxu have fewer than 5 of their leaders, so let's say that good old Blinn here is killed early on, and now he's in the tanks, and instead of reviving him for 1 spice later on, that Tleilaxu can revive someone else's leader. So let's say that, Feyd-Rautha is in the tanks, and he's a 6 strength leader. Well, the Tleilaxu can spend 3 spice, because again, they get discounted rates, and they can revive Feyd, and now they have a Feyd Gola, who's one of their leaders that they can use in combat. And if Feyd gets killed, they can always revive him again in the next turn for 3 spice. And there's nothing that the Baron can do about that. So the Golas are a way for the relatively weak leaders of the Tleilaxu to suddenly become much, much stronger. Now, it should be noted that let's say that I did revive Feyd-Rautha, and Atreides had Feyd-Rautha as a traitor, and I used them in a battle against Atreides, then yes, they can reveal that traitor card, and my Gola, it was their traitor. So, unless I know for sure that they're safe. What I like to do is if I've revealed a face dancer and that kills a leader, I like to revive that leader as one of my Golas. So I'm holding the card. It's sitting there face up in front of everybody. So I know this is a safe leader that I can use in any battle. And they're fairly disposable. Because I can always get somebody else out in the next turn. So that is the Tleilaxu. I really enjoy playing them. It is a faction that you want to bide your time with. You need to give it a couple of turns in order to start to really get some income. You're not going to be able to afford a very good treachery card or any treachery cards really in that first turn, maybe the first couple of turns. 5 spice, it just depends, but usually that's not enough to get you much early on. But spend your spice to get onto the planet, pick a few fights, start filling up those tanks. Go ahead and sacrifice Blinn so that you are set up to be able to revive a Gola if you're playing advanced, so that you can start using people's really strong leaders against them and against the other factions as well. And then, get into some fights so that you can start earning some spice. The more that people fight and the more the tanks are filled, the better things are for you. And if you get into a situation where you're trying to find an ally, somebody that can benefit from your revivals, that's the way to go for that. And you can go in and stir things up with fairly reckless abandon as the Tleilaxu. So that's the Tleilaxu for Dune, and I'll talk about the Ixians in another video and other elements of the Dune board game. Keep playing and let the spice flow. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.